Welcome to this video. In this video, I will look at the role of the teacher in classroom games. Should we step back and let the children play language games by themselves? This used to be a common belief among teachers who use child-centered methods, and there are still many teachers who follow this idea. Personally, I am a strong advocate of child-centered learning. But I think the assumption that the teacher shouldn't be involved in the games the children are playing is a misunderstanding of child-centered principles. Of course, it depends very much on the game. With some games, all we need to do is help get a game started. But there are many games where if the children are left to play by themselves, this wouldn't maximize the learning potential of the game. With many games, we need to step in and out of a game quite frequently. And it is often a nice idea to play with the children. As Vygotsky argued, for a child to reach her full potential, she needs to interact with a more knowledgeable person, which, when playing games in an English as a foreign language classroom, usually means interacting with the teacher. The quality of children's interaction with us is also very important. We need to put as many achievable challenges in the path of the children as possible, so as to maximize their learning, and help them reach their full potential in the time available. But we need to be careful how we interact with the children in games. We need to avoid being the focus of a game, or the entertainer. It is essential that the children have ownership of the games. Immerse themselves in the games in a natural and spontaneous way, and don't feel they are following us, or playing the games through us. Interaction with a more knowledgeable person also doesn't necessarily mean interacting directly with us. In many games, we can interact with children indirectly, such as by gradually making the cards in a game more difficult, or by choosing language targets that are at the cutting edge of the children's knowledge. We can then be available to hint or help as and when needed. The roles of the teacher. I think we have at least 4 roles to play in classroom games. Planning the games. Adjusting the level of the games. Supporting children who need help and making sure all children are included. And, when appropriate, taking part. Let's look at each of these in turn. Planning. Very often, this means deciding on particular games to use based on children's age, English ability, the size of the class, the layout of the classroom, and other factors. But we don't necessarily have to be the person who decides exactly which games to play. An alternative that I have often used effectively is to decide on a few alternative games, and for the children to choose which ones they want to play. And, in some situations, we can give the children more complete freedom to choose. Adjusting the level. It is of course important that the language content of a game is at the appropriate level for the children, and this normally needs to be decided by us. Ideally, games need to contain enough familiar language content to give the children security, but also enough language content that challenges the children to learn. This challenging content could be new words and patterns, or it could just be words and patterns that the children need to review. The thing to avoid is to play a game with language content that is not challenging at all, just because the game is fun. This means the games we play need to be as versatile as possible. We need to be able to use a game for a wide variety of language targets. This is not just because we need to adjust a game to fit the children's English level. It is also because using a versatile game makes it easier for us to make words and patterns more difficult without introducing a new game. This leads to steadier lessons, where the focus is more on learning and less on the stimulation of having exciting new games. For example, with a Go Fish game, we can use the same game to practice a wide variety of vocabulary. And we can also adjust the language pattern the children use to ask each other for cards. If they are collecting sets of animals, they could say, "May I have your gorillas? Do you have any gorillas?" Or whatever pattern is appropriate for their English ability. Supporting the children who need help. A good game challenges the children to learn. But we also need to make sure that the children handle these challenges successfully. This is important if we want the children to take on more and more challenges with a positive attitude. When a child encounters a new word or pattern in a game, but can't understand it, she needs to have a way to solve this problem. It is sometimes possible to design a game so she can solve problems without any help. For example, if a game involves flashcards, the cards can have pictures on one side and phonically regular words or sentences on the other side. When a child can't identify a card, she can turn it over and try to read the words or sentences on the other side. There will, of course, be many occasions when the children can't solve problems by themselves. So we need to be available to help. They may want to ask us questions, and it is important to try and establish a mutually respectful relationship with the children where they feel comfortable asking us these questions. It is sometimes appropriate just to give a straight answer to a question, but it is usually best to give hints that help the children find their own way through any difficulty they are having. And how about when the children make mistakes with their English when they are playing games? I think this requires us to prioritize. We need to assess whether a mistake is important enough for us to intervene, and also decide whether it can be dealt with without disturbing the flow of the game too much. Some games are easier to pause than others. Even some important mistakes can be dealt with later. We can make a note of the mistakes and address the issues in follow-up activities. I often design games that specifically address the mistakes the children have been making in previous games. When I think it is best to deal with mistakes at the moment they arise during a game, my personal favorite way of doing it is to use a puppet or a toy animal. If the animal is a toy cow, when a child makes a mistake, the cow just indicates that there has been a mistake, saying something like, "Uh-oh," or "Moo." This gives the child a chance to reflect and self-correct. If she can't self-correct, I give hints. Alternatively, I may ask other children to help. This is sometimes a good approach, but not always. It depends very much on the personalities of the children and the relationships between them. Also, when other children help, They are likely to say the correct answer before the child who made a mistake has a chance to reflect and self-correct, unless we can train them to give hints. Making sure all children are included. We need to try to ensure that children who are better at English or more self-confident don't have more chance of doing well in a game than children who are not so good at English or less self-confident. One of the best ways to address this issue is for points in a game and winning or losing a game to depend on the roll of the dice or some other random element, not on English ability. If a child performs a language task before rolling a dice, we can give hints or help a bit to ensure that she succeeds with the language task. So doing well in the game only depends on the dice. Another way to encourage children is for us to cheat in a playful way. We can cheat to make sure that a team or individual child that is losing catches up. We can cheat to ensure that a child on a team who is weaker at English gets the most points for her team, so that the other members of the team don't exclude her and value her as an equal or even special member of the team. We also need to make sure that individual children within a team are all getting enough chances to participate. The best way to achieve this is to use as many turn-based games as possible, rather than games where some children will dominate a game too much. This is especially important if some of the children lack confidence or are very quiet. We may also need to rearrange teams or use quieter games to make it more likely that less confident children will take part more actively. Taking part. We can join in the games and have a lot of fun ourselves. If we do take part, we need to make sure the children are not looking at us every time they do something in a game to see whether their English is correct, or to see whether they are doing what we want them to do. If this happens, it is best if we step back and play with them on another occasion, when they are more used to playing without depending on us. We also need to make sure that we don't dominate or have a big advantage in a game. This is another reason for playing games that depend on luck, not English ability. And it is best to be fallible and make mistakes sometimes. With a bit of luck, the children will notice our mistakes and correct us. One advantage of playing with the children is that it can sometimes make it easier for us to challenge the children to use new words or patterns. We can do this in small ways, interactively, at any point in a game. Or we can set up a game in a way that enables us to escalate the difficulty of the language being used. Let's look at how we could do this when playing Fruit Basket. In this game, chairs are arranged in a circle, and there is one chair less than the number of children playing the game. A child sits on each of the chairs, and one child stands in the center. The child in the center calls out something like red skirts, black shoes, or white socks. If she calls out white socks, all the children with white socks have to stand up and race to sit on a chair, including the child who is in the center. The child who has no chair stands in the center and calls out the next instruction. If we play with the children, we can sometimes deliberately lose, so that we can stand in the center and call out a new language pattern. It might be a pattern the children are familiar with, or it might be completely new. If the pattern is new, the excitement of the game should motivate the children to want to learn the new pattern. For example, we might call out, "I like strawberries," and everybody who likes strawberries changes chairs, saying, "I like strawberries." The next child who stands in the center uses the same pattern we used, calling out something like, "I like tennis." The children could continue calling out, "I like," until we deliberately lose again and change the pattern. When we lose the next time, we might call out, "I have a dog." And the children who have dogs change chairs and say, "I have a dog." The next child in the center then might say, "I have a sister." There are many different patterns that can be used in this game. For example, we could change the pattern to who questions, like, "Who likes ice cream?" Or relative clauses like, "Everybody who likes cats." So, we have many roles to play in a child-centered, game-based lesson. Thank you very much for watching. The next video in this series will be a search for the perfect game.